Welcome to Canada's Court, and I'm not here with good news. The men's squad lost to France 82 to 73. So after going 3-0 in the group of death, Canada falls just short of getting to play for a medal. Coach O is here. He's the host of the Project 365 podcast, and he's been with us for all these Olympic Games. Coach O, how are you feeling today?
a bit
Yeah,
di-
that's it. That's
a
it.
bit a bit disappointed. Um, it's definitely tough. You're looking at a team that did pretty good at the World Cup last year and was looking to add it to their roster and was looking and had high expectations. It's a rough one. It's a tough one. Um, Not the result that we wanted,
No.
but a lot of Canadian fans have a lot of like good things to look at because as much as the world is basketball wise, the world is growing in skill. We're seeing more and more players, especially on the international stage. You have a lot of good things to look forward to if you are a Canadian basketball fan.
I think one of the parts that makes us, sting a little bit more is like the excitement for this team had just kind of reached a peak. Like they went 3-0 in the group play. They played some tough games, some hard fought games, but they were playing well. And then you look over at the France side and you're like, okay, like they've got a lot of talent there, but they didn't have quite the same. They didn't look nearly as strong. I think there's no question going into this, they didn't look nearly as strong in the group play as Canada did. But they just came out almost a completely different team, right? They planned well. You got to give a lot of credit to them. Their coaching staff clearly had a good game plan. But I think that's where this big disappointment comes from. Is like there was so much expectation placed on these players and placed on them by themselves, right? Like there was a lot of confidence on this team as they should have, and so to go out like this. Yeah, not exactly what we were waking up to hope to watch today.
Yeah, no, I agree, and you felt it right out the gate.
Mm.
France really utilizing the boost from the home crowd. Um, all I could hear during that game was the French fans were all like cheering, and going into that kind of hostile environment, France did what they needed to do, and that was really use the energy of the crowd early. Whereas Canada, you're going into this game with a bit of an advantage in terms of you know I want to say you battled in the group of death. You finished first. You played good. Um, the mentality going into that game, uh, I didn't really feel like Canada imposed itself early. And what happens in basketball when you don't impose your will on the other team, you react to a lot of stuff. And I mean, you're looking at Isaiah Cordigne, two quick threes
Whew.
early. That's enough to get the crowd going, right? So this is just again learning experience. But whenever you go into an environment like that, you're the away team. You got to try to win the first 4 minutes of the game to try to get the. You got to try to take the crowd out of it.
Hmm.
Um, but because we didn't really impose our will, you kind of felt like France was really utilizing that extra boost from the crowd, and they had a strong first quarter again. So
Well, let's talk about that kind of strategic decision that helped them impose their will. We talked a lot about in our preview about how you had to watch out for France's size, but we were talking height wise. We were thinking, Gobert and Wemby kind of clogging it up in there. But what they really ended up going with wasn't size height wise, but width. They went with some of their bigger players. I mean, look at you're gonna have to help me with some of these pronunciations. You're
yeah,
the one
yeah,
with the French background here, but
yeah.
Yabusele, I know Yabusele.
Hmm.
He had 22 points, 6 of 9 from the field, 8 of 9 from the free throw line. They ended up going with bigger, stronger guys inside to kind of counteract Canada's lack of height in there. What did you make of that kind of move from the France side?
So this is where the chess game started.
Mm-hmm.
everybody kind of expected them to start Rudy and Victor Wembanyama. They decided to not start Rudy, and Rudy in this game only played 3 minutes, right? So you kind of put yourself in a situation where they decided to sacrifice their size for, going back to what you said, a bit more uh, mobile, mobile and size combination, right?
Hmm.
And I think what that did was that kind of like allowed them to use the mobility and the strength to feed on what we deemed was the weakness that Team Canada had, which was playing against more physical players that provide multiple efforts, right? You mentioned one player, Yabusele, 30 minutes, 6 of 9, 22 points. And Matthias Lesor off the bench went 19 minutes, 9 to 14 with a total of 13 points. You're looking at those two bigs combining for 35 points of France's 82. But again, the interior presence of France, what that did is that, in a way, that slowed down the game a little bit and then allow Canada to run out the way that they wanted to and the way that they have done in previous game. Because now when they throw the ball into the post, you have to double down, you have to show help. They made good plays of kicking it out and not turning the ball over, but then they would grab offensive rebound, right? You felt like France was really on all of the 50-50 balls in terms of energy, in terms of extra efforts. And what that did is that kind of slowed down the Canadian side, because now you got to make a conscious effort to not leak out, because France is susceptible to going for those offensive rebounds. So the they did exactly what they needed to do to take Canada out of what they wanted to do offensively. Because when they had success giving the ball inside, they kept going to it. They kept going
Yep.
to it, and then that kind of like translated back into Canada not being able to run out. And another factor that didn't really help, we talked about it: 33 points at the free throw line,
Hmm.
33 for 42 from the free throw line from France.
Oof.
Again, when you get the clock to stop and you're at the free throw line, Canada had to play against a lot of 5-on-5 set defense, which is
Hmm.
not the way that they had a lot of success beginning in this game, right? So, in a way, because France imposed themselves and kept going inside, that in a way took Canada out of what they wanted to do offensively, and yeah, put Canada in a lot of different situations because of fouls, and the rotations kind of shifted, so it caused a whole lot of issues, Phil.
Yeah, like you said, Canada had done so well throughout this tournament, getting transition buckets. They have so many guys who are so good in transition, and when you're just not getting those opportunities, I mean, it's impossible to get those opportunities when they're shooting free throws, right? It's so easy to get back and defend. You're just getting zero of those chances, and you really saw that. It kind of goes back a little bit to our initial preview of the Olympics. We talked about the players who weren't able to make it to Paris. The biggest one, both height wise and probably name wise, other than Andrew Wiggins, maybe, would be Zach Edey. And you kind of, as I was watching this game, I thought, man, this would be a perfect game for Zach Edey, right? Like if you have him on Yabusele down there, you're getting a lot less fouls and a lot more stops, in my opinion. I think obviously he's still young and he's got a lot of room to grow, but we watched it a lot during the March Madness tournament, how much he's able to kind of, you're not pushing Zach Edey around very easily, right? That guy's got some size, he's got the strength, and that was exactly what it felt like Canada was missing, right?
Absolutely. But I have to give credit to Kem Birch in 8 minutes,
Mm.
5 points, 5 rebounds, right? So Kem Birch did what he needed to do coming off the bench. His activity altered a couple of shots. I believe he had one block. Yeah, he had one block. So just him being able to provide that kind of resistance is something that provided value, and that helped Canada chip away at the lead. But again, going back to what you said, that's a lot of pressure playing against bigger bodies, playing against the width, like we said, the size of these French bigs. Yeah, definitely someone like Zach Edey, that would have been minutes for him, because I think in a matchup like this, it's someone that can provide you good enough of I want to say flow in your offense, because Zach
Hmm.
Edey is pretty good with his post touches, can kick the ball out, can make good decisions. But again, Um, yeah, it's definitely something that we're looking forward to, right? But obviously, because of obligations to the beginning of his career, he wanted to
Yeah.
focus. He wanted to focus on that. So I gotta
And as we
respect the
said, totally
decision.
fair. Yeah,
Yeah, we
exactly.
gotta we gotta respect that. But you look back at it, you're like, okay, like that's probably the biggest flaw that was on this Canadian team. It's just like versus interior, more physical defender, we just seem to get overpowered and overmatched.
And I think one of this the more what makes this kind of more disappointing is because as I'm thinking about it, I'm like, okay, but we could have him for 2028, and that'll be pretty cool. That's 4 years away. We got to wait a long time to do this again. And I know you had a lot of fun doing it. I had a lot of fun doing it. That's a long distance to wait for some of these for this such a exciting and fun international competition. But we'll talk a little bit more about the future in a bit. We got to give props to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I mean, he was on it. He was doing everything he could to try and pull Canada back within reach. He had 27 points. You also got to shout out RJ Barrett. The two guys who were the top guys for Canada continued to be the top two guys. RJ Barrett had 16 points, 6 of 11. You're going to take that any day. Um, but it kind of dropped off after that. In previous games, we had other guys who stepped up. You think of like Andrew Nemhard that last game. You had someone else who was a kind of a third option. It didn't really have that this game, did we?
No, that's exactly it. I think in terms of who the next guy was, right? I had in our last podcast talked about how I thought Jamal was going to be someone that was going to step up for that exact reason because you knew that France was going to take away Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, so you just needed someone else to be able to consistently make plays for that pressure to alleviate now off of Shai. Because what ends up happening is that Shea ended up having to play 37 minutes, which was out of the norm if we're talking about in correspondence to what happened in this tournament.
Mm-hmm.
So Shea's buckets were hard, right? So what ends up happening is that he lost a lot of energy, and that in a way that translated into having a couple of miscues and breakthrough on the defensive end. But he's carrying such an offensive load that you needed somebody else to really do that for him to be able to get back to his easy buckets. The
Mm-hmm.
more easier buckets you could get on offense, the more energy you could play on the defensive end. Um, the opportunities were there for Jamal. As I mentioned, he's was going to be that was going to be the game that we needed him. Again, 24 minutes off the bench, 3 for 13, only 1 for 4, but again, 7 points total. It's tough. It's tough.
Yeah.
It's tough to win when they take away your number one option and you have somebody else that has to step up. He has the opportunities, but just didn't make the shots. So that's the biggest thing that we, as Canadian fans, the biggest thing is we saw that the opportunity was there, and if he hits a
Yeah.
couple, we're maybe having a different discussion right now.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you think about that 3 of 13. If that's even 5 of 13, like you said, huge difference. And we kind of talked about it the whole, and it kind of gives us a little bit of, we were right to track this, right? Like every episode, we talked about, okay, how is Jamal Murray in this game? How because we knew you said it from the start. We're going to need him to be up here by the time the games get real serious. By the time we're playing in elimination games and they were working him up to that. We kind of felt like the last game he'd done well distributing, but he never really got that like aggressive scoring touch that we've seen from him in some of those big playoff runs from the Denver Nuggets, especially their championship one. And so, yeah, we're not that we wanted to be right on this in this way, but we were right that he was going to be a very important piece. But yeah, if you don't have that guy who's kind of obviously RJ Barrett was the second best player on the team through the tournament. But going in, if you had asked somebody to rank, in terms of at least NBA career and NBA talent, who was second on the team, it would have been Jamal, and he just did not kind of have that scoring ability, and that's what they needed today. That's what they needed. Um, Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. It's we were just talking before the podcast that how do you bring energy for a podcast where we feel because we've been so into this and so much watching and it's such a kind of deflating loss almost to come from that high.
Gee,
What?
and it's like you're, but that's the thing too. You're invested, right?
Yeah.
So, um, I hope that this run motivated a lot of people to now invest a little bit more time, funding, just like attention
Hmm.
to the growth of Canadian basketball, because you're looking at all these players all coming together. This was definitely exciting for us to be able to keep track of, right?
Hmm.
A lot of these, for a lot of young players, a lot of these Canadian heroes are getting the chance to play every night in the NBA, right? So um, it's bittersweet, but when you're looking at the long picture, I think we're heading the right direction.
Okay, just one last note about the game before we kind of look ahead a little bit more. I think you mentioned the free throw situation. Um, the game I found, and we talked about this beforehand too. The foul situation, it wasn't that there was being bad calls made. I don't think I would argue that the refing cost Canada the game. I would almost never argue that for a basketball game. There's always
Hmm.
other things.
Hmm.
But it did feel like every kind of 50-50 play, every call that could have gone one way or the other. And I'm not suggesting any sort of, suspicious. I think it just genuinely this is how it happened. I don't think anything suspicious happened, but it did feel like everyone that was kind of 50-50 or in like a very important time for Canada went France's way. Am I completely off base on that, or what did you think?
No, I think for first of all, credit to France for winning those 50-50 battles, right? You
Yep.
always felt like France was making the extra effort, right? I could think of a possession where there was a battle for the ball. There was a battle for the ball. It was going this way. I think it was in the first half. It was in the first half. Yeah,
Hmm.
you felt like Canada was we're trying to grab the defensive rebound,
Yep.
and then RJ ended up getting out the pile with it, and then just
Hmm.
Victor using his
Oh
reach
yeah.
just sweat. You know what I mean? Like he
That was
just
wild. That was
yeah,
wild.
it's just like you saw him like use all his length to really just like get that ball steal. He went around the back and then just a dump off, and then that led to a foul on the other side, right? So it's like, I mean, as much as when we needed the calls, I felt like the French side just really did a good job of keeping and matching the energy. And I think like that is something that you can't really put on scouting reports, right? But I agree with you. Like I think like at a certain point when Canada was slowly clawing into it, whenever we needed the ball to go our way, we just weren't getting it, and that's the way that the game of basketball goes, right?
And I was just looking at the stats before we started talking. Canada's biggest run was a 5-0 run. They never got more than that. And when you're clawing back from such a difference, you need to have a point where you get three or four unanswered buckets in a row, right? And they just, again, credit to France. They never kind of let the foot off the gas. There was times where Canada clawed a little bit, but it was never because France had stopped playing hard or stopped working. It was just Canada could not get over that hump. It felt like.
So if you're looking at Canada's best possessions, you're right with what you're saying. But if you're looking at what Canada's best possessions when they were getting where they were getting a lot of their stops, was when Lou Dort was picking up all the way up full court, and he was turning the French defense. And we talked about this. We said France's weakness on this team is their guard play. He was picking up so high up full court, and then France was starting with we're starting up their offense with like anywhere between 11 to 13 seconds on the clock. That's a great way for you to put yourself out of that situation, because if you're trying to guard France's physicality with just allowing them to post up and giving them a lot of possessions to be able to swing the ball, reverse it, back you down, kick it back out, give it back inside, like you're not playing to your advantage, right? So I would have liked Canada to have a bit more stretches of that where they picked up, I guess, a bit earlier in the shot clock and forced France deep into that shot clock before they got the first post touch. But the issue with that was that when you didn't impose yourself, you found yourself in a situation where France went a lot of times to the free throw line, right? So with them, in a way putting a lot of pressure on interior defense and being in the bonus, Canada now has to back off a little bit because you don't want to give them free throws, right?
Yeah.
So that's where that balance kind of comes in. I think when it comes to Wemby, we were right with Dylan Brooks starting with the assignment on Wemby.
Hmm.
I think the only thing that I would probably, just looking back at it, got the chance to look at a few clips afterwards. It's just that when Wemby catches the ball, we mentioned Wemby struggles with physicality. When Wemby catches the ball in the post, Wemby is looking to create a play. Wemby has a almost like a guard mentality where he's looking to create a play where it's like pass. I feel like in that situation, you have to stay home and really allow Wemby to go score 1-on-1 because that's where France had the advantage. They knew which one of their bigs was ready to score 1-on-1. And Wemby was more looking for the cutters, pass, kick it back out three, right? So again, it's just a bit of balance on that. But again, it's water under the bridge, but we could only look forward.
Okay, well then let's do that. Let's look forward. Obviously, not the result Canada wanted, but overall, what do you take from this experience? These 4 games we got to watch.
It's very exciting. I think for me personally, the things that kind of stand out is I think Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is he's on his way to winning an MVP very soon.
Yeah,
He's on his way to winning an MVP very soon
yeah.
because like it doesn't like got the chance to do it in the NBA, but now he's doing it on the international stage. Uh, Yeah, like it's undeniable that he's going to be in those MVP conversation and going to be considered in the top 5 players in the league categories for potentially maybe the next 3 to 4 years easily.
Especially because OKC is so good, right? It's one thing to be a really good player on a team that's kind of middling. OKC is probably going to be better this year than they were last year, and they were pretty good last year.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're the number one player playing like Shea is, yeah, I would not be surprised. I mean, was he second or third in MVP voting this year? I can't quite remember,
Mm-hmm.
but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think you're right. I think we're seeing the next MVP before our eyes for
Mm-hmm.
sure.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. And I think the next thing too would probably be something that was very eye opening. It seems like player like Dylan Brooks, even though he didn't have a good game right now,
Hmm.
I would say players like Dylan Brooks and Lou Dort at the FIBA level, they seem to potentially their games. It's almost like their games go to a different level because they're allowed to be a bit more physical. The shot when they make shots, they're really good. They could guard multiple positions, so that's very eye opening. And the next thing, I got to make Raptors fans happy.
Yeah, we
RJ
got it.
Barrett, RJ Barrett, you have a lot of good things if you're a Raptors fan to look forward to. Really, I'm really impressed with what RJ was able to do for this team because I think that for him to do it on the international phase with the court being smaller, Biggs being able to sit in the lane, him still being able to find ways to get all the way to the rim and consistently, that's the key, offering 15 to 20 anywhere consistently, is a consistent source to rely on.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think that's something definitely to look forward to. We were right for covering him early on this year, man, because like
Yeah,
this was going.
we are. Some people might name us the presidents of the RJ Barrett fan club, and I think, yeah, it's really exciting for Raptors fans if they want to take
Mm-hmm.
a positive away from this, a team that we will get to see not 4 years from now, but in a few months. It's going to be really exciting to watch him, and if he can keep up this level of play, maybe improve some small things like get that free throw shooting actually to. He's shot the ball very well from the free throw line at the Olympics here. If that translates to the Toronto Raptors, they're in a that changes your perspective as a Raptors fan significantly. If you've got a guy like that who can be, your second best player, and as we've talked about before, a guy who's very used to being a second best player. On Team Canada, he's the second best player. When he was in university, he was playing next to Zion. He was the number
Mm-hmm.
2 guy. There's a lot of promising stuff there, and that's something to be hopeful for. Anything else, looking forward, you're excited about? It's gonna be tough, kind of. I think it's gonna take some time for me to get this taste out of my mouth of the loss. You know what I mean? Like, I'll still watch the rest of the Olympics here, but deflating. I've used the word deflating a couple times, but it's a bit of a letdown. We were so excited. It's tough.
I agree with you, but I think for the listeners and the watchers, I think something that you have to take into consideration is I wouldn't disconnect from the Olympics just yet. I still want to be able to see how the top teams are going to fare, because that's what you're going to have to potentially be able to match up. Maybe not USA, because USA has like such a turnover in terms of like players that they have and whatnot. But I mean, at the time of this recording, we know that Germany is going through, which would have been Canada's next potential matchup, right? So Germany will play France, and Serbia making a comeback, being very down against the Australian team, and then being able to move up, right? So I think there's a lot of like playing styles and all that kind of stuff that if you're not familiar with the international gameplay, I think you still should continue to watch because there's a lot of good basketball, and these are probably going to be the nations that we're going to have to compete as we look forward to the next Olympics, but also the next World Cup too, Phil.
Well, let's look a little bit ahead to that. I think it's still great experience that these players got together, and I think a majority of the players that you saw will be playing for Team Canada both at the next World Cup and hopefully the next Olympics. I don't think, as long as, injuries are okay, and it's always weird with NBA, like you never know who exactly you're going to get for sure. I mean, look at the Andrew Wiggins situation, him not being available. But assuming all positive, you're probably going to see Shai back on this roster. I think that's pretty fair to say. Jamal Murray probably too for the next little bit. Is there anybody else, that we didn't see? We mentioned Zach Edey. Going forward, as we look to, the next time we see this national team together, who else are you kind of excited about seeing play for the national team, or you'd like to put on that Canada jersey that maybe hasn't been there?
So Benedict Mathurin is somebody to look out for. Benedict Mathurin suffered an injury late into the season. He hit his postseason with the Indiana Pacers. Got to show the respect, fellow Montreal, fellow Montreal native, But
there's
yeah,
a few of those on the roster. You got you got some representation there.
Oh yeah. I think Ben, in terms of size, defensive versatility, and if he could continue making shots, right? If he could continue being a threat, being a catch and shoot, kind of like use a bit of the RJ blueprint that he's used, because he's going to be in a situation where he's going to have to play off of people. He's going to have to, when Tyrese kicks the ball out, he's going to have to make some catch and shoot threes. If Andrew Nemhard's in the game, he's going to have to play some catch and shoot threes. Not just with Canada for Andrew Nemhard, but also in Indiana, right? Yeah, so I think, and again, he's the biggest thing with him, and this is definitely something, I got to shamelessly plug my Montreal, roots, right? I got to play.
Yeah, keep it going.
Yeah, they compete defensively. That's the number one. You want to be able to compete defensively. So that's definitely something that I'm going to be looking forward to. And the next one that I'm probably looking forward to is Shaedon Sharpe. Shaedon Sharpe has the kind of runway with the Portland Trailblazers right now to be able to really carve a role for himself with that organization, but also expand on his skill set. Because as we know, Portland right now is in a rebuild kind of situation. So they've said that they really want to dive into and go full on the youth movement, right? And Shaedon Sharpe is a part of that. Shaedon Sharpe is young. I believe he's I want to say 2021 years old, right? If I'm not mistaken.
I'll look it up
Uh,
for you. You keep talking.
yeah, yeah,
I'll look it up.
yeah, yeah.
21, 21.
21, yeah.
Yeah.
So Shaden Sharp is his shot making ability. That's one, and also his athleticism. Shaden Sharp has a I would say high 30s, 40-inch vert, but he also has a long wingspan, right? So that could provide a lot of value. So those are two guys that I would put on our watch list for the next Olympics and just for the NBA season too, Phil.
Absolutely. Well, and when you talk about kind of the needs Team Canada has, I think those guys fit in perfectly, right? This game specifically, we talked about how Shea and RJ did what they needed to do, but we didn't have that punch off the bench that could get you, 15, 16 points. And Shane Sharp and Benedict Mathurin are both guys who proved to be scorers at the NBA level. And you're not always going to have one of those guys go off. But if you have more possibilities at that, that gives you a better chance. And then, of course, like we mentioned, Zach Edey fits probably the biggest glaring hole for Team Canada, especially when you think about the fact that Kelly Olynyk, he's a little older now. He's probably not got as much international basketball left in him. They're going to need a guy like Zach Edey to really come in and make an impact right away. I think he's going to have a busy next couple of years because he's got the Memphis Grizzlies, who also desperately need someone like him to come in and make an impact. It's possible. It's been talked about that he's probably going to even start for Memphis, which is pretty huge when you think about where people were on him last year. And says a lot about him. We've talked about him lots too. But yeah, I think those are really promising. How do you feel? How do you feel overall? We finish this Olympics. We don't get to go to the medal match, but looking forward, are you feeling what's kind of your confidence level as we think about the next World Cup and the next Olympics? Which France had the big advantage here by having the home crowd, and we heard it. You heard it on the broadcast. It was big. In the next Olympics is good. Next Summer Olympics is in L.A.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to be able to get a lot of Canadian fans there. I mean, obviously,
Mm-hmm.
if there's a USA game, that's going to be the biggest crowd. But I think you're gonna see a lot of You know what? We might even have to go there. I don't know.
We
We'll
might,
we'll see where we're at in
yeah,
2028. We might have
we
to
might.
make a trip.
Yeah, no, that's the biggest thing. I'm just trying to look up when the next, yeah, so the next FIBA World Cup for basketball will be in Qatar, right? That's in 2027. The biggest challenge right now is going to be how do we keep the same level of commitment. I think
Mm,
that was our advantage going into this tournament.
big time.
The fact that we had a lot of complementary pieces, but we had a lot of people that committed to the program. That's going to be, I think, the biggest challenge because you want to make sure that you keep the same kind of involvement for the people that are going to eventually compete. You still want them to compete in certain Olympic windows. You want to have a really nice rotation. You want to have a good roster going into the World Cup before the Olympics, right? So that's going to be, I think, the key is the retention. The retention field is going to be
I'm
like
I'm
how are we able to keep guys?
I'm not too nervous about that because I think this experience, it's been 24 years since Canada had a men's team at the Olympics. I think for two reasons here. Um, a, the players who played, I think are going to want back. I think they're going to feel like they've got some unfinished business. That did not go how they wanted it to go. It still a good experience, but I think those guys like Shea, like Dylan, like Lou, like RJ, they've gotten a taste now, right? And I think they're gonna. Those guys have also all proved to be pretty loyal to the program, and I think that they're gonna want it even more now. That's my hope. We're optimistic here. Well, that's my hope. And then on top of that, I think you're gonna see, um, those guys who maybe weren't on the team, Shaden Sharp, Zach Edey, maybe got some other people we don't even know about. They're going to have been watching this. I'm sure they were all watching this, and they're going to think, "Oh wow, what if I'd been there? How cool would that have been? What a great experience that would be." And then on a third point, there is something that's very exciting about the fact that you would be playing if you make it to the next Olympics in Los Angeles. Like you are so close to you're going to have so much more fan support, like we said, and you're going to be playing in a much more comfortable. Not that France is uncomfortable, but something you're a more familiar environment. I think I agree with you. I think that commitment's going to be essential. I'm interesting to see I think Jordi Fernandez did a great job with the team. This was a rough day, but I think he did a good job with the team. So we'll see what happens from a coaching perspective. That could change too because he's just got a new job. So that's something else that's very interesting. Obviously, we were supposed to. It was supposed to be Nick Nurse at this Olympics, but he bowed out at the World Cup last year, getting the job in Philly and being fired by the Raptors. But I think the pieces are aligned that Canada's, if anything, going to be hungrier going into this next Olympics, and maybe that's partly in fact that they've lost the way that they have. There's going to be a little bit more because this time they kind of came in as like the I don't want to say the plucky underdog, but like the team everybody was kind of outside the U.S. People were hyping up, right? They're saying, "Oh wow, Canada's so cool." Next time they come, it's going to be okay, you came in as the kind of the fun young team. Now it's serious, right? Like there's going to be a bit more expectations placed on them, but I think it's I'm excited. I'm looking forward to that at least.
Yeah, no, you made a lot of good points there, and I think that will definitely be like the biggest thing because again, the landscape of basketball in general um, is probably going to change, right? So we're looking at Victor, right? Victor's 20 years old, so Victor's going to be 24 next year. So next Olympics, sorry. So he's probably going to mature a lot with his game. But then again, like you're looking at the favorites, right? USA. USA probably no 4 years from now, probably no LeBron, no KD, maybe no Steph, right? So you're wondering what the new crop of players is going to be, right? So like the whole landscape of basketball can change, but you're not sure of that. You can't really control. The biggest thing you can control is how you approach your preparation for the next 4 years, right? So that's going to be like the biggest thing. It's going to be about, yeah, even though things may change, but you got to control the things that you can control, right? So um, we've done a good job at with our younger teams, right? With our, I would say our farm system, if I was to call it,
Mm-hmm.
where
Yeah,
we're
yeah.
helping these young players develop. So I think that's going to be like the biggest thing, right? It's going to be about continuing to do that, continue to expand, but also like just make sure that when comes go time, like we're not trying to get ready by trying to search for extra players and whatnot. We want to make sure that we know what we got going into these windows and into these tournaments for sure.
Coach O, I don't really want to close things out. It's been a lot of fun chatting with you about all this basketball. I think maybe that's one of the most disappointing things about the loss is and from a player perspective, you always want to keep playing, right? And for us, we always want to keep podcasting, but we can't control the game, so that's what happened. But it's been a lot of fun to recap all these games with you. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you along for these and sharing your terrific insights. It's been great, and we'll be. This isn't the last time we chat. I'm fairly confident. We'll be talking more basketball here as things go on. But it's been a big pleasure to have you on, and I think hopefully a treat for the listeners as well.
No, I appreciate the opportunity. If I was able to provide any kind of insight to any listeners or whatever, to me, that's what I love to do. So yeah, we'll look forward to the next kind of what the next thing is for Canadian basketball is, and on Canada's court, I know you'll be on top of it, Phil. So
We get a bit
I'm
of a
there.
rest now. We get a bit of a
Yeah.
rest now. I feel like because the next big thing is probably the Toronto Raptors and the NBA season starting back up. I don't think there's too much in terms of Canadian basketball on the way on the schedule there. But yeah, you get a bit of a break. You get a bit of a break, but we'll still be talking basketball. It's all
No,
good.
absolutely, absolutely. Always a pleasure.